3 days after burying her father, Elena Voss stood at an altar in a blood-stained wedding dress she didn't choose, about to marry a killer she'd never met. The church smelled like gun oil and fear. Her hands were bound, not with rope, but with her father's debts. $50 million he'd stolen from the Devereaux family, and now she was the payment. The man waiting for her at that altar? Luca Devereaux, the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast. But when their eyes met, she didn't see a monster. She saw something far more dangerous: obsession. Stay until the end to see how Elena's captivity becomes her salvation. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The funeral had been small, pathetically so. Elena Voss stood beside her father's grave in a black dress she'd bought from a thrift store 2 years ago, watching as 2 hired workers lowered the cheap casket into the ground. No flowers, no mourners beyond herself, just rain, mud, and the hollow sound of dirt hitting wood. She should have felt something. Grief, maybe. Anger. But Thomas Voss had stopped being her father long before the heart attack killed him. He'd been a ghost in their apartment for years, drunk more often than sober, paranoid always, jumping at shadows and muttering about debts he couldn't pay. Debts to dangerous people, he'd said once when she was 16. She hadn't understood then. She'd thought he meant loan sharks, credit cards, normal, desperate people problems. She understood now. The first man appeared at the cemetery gates before the workers had finished filling the grave. Tall, dressed in black, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He didn't approach, just stood there, watching. Elena's stomach turned to ice. A second man appeared on her right, then a third behind her. She wasn't being paranoid. She was being surrounded. "Miss Voss," the scarred man's voice cut through the rain. "You need to come with us." Elena's pulse hammered in her throat. "I don't know who you are." "Yes, you do." He stepped forward, and she saw the gun holstered at his side. Not hidden. A message. "Your father knew what would happen if he died without paying what he owed. You're coming with us. We can do this easy, or we can do this hard. Your choice." She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to bolt for the trees, to fight, to scream for help. But this was a private cemetery on the edge of nowhere, and these men had the eyes of people who'd dragged women into cars before. Easy or hard, she was leaving with them either way. "Where are we going?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You'll see." They drove for 2 hours. Elena sat in the back of a black SUV between 2 silent guards, watching the city fade into suburbs, then rural highways, then forests she didn't recognize. Her phone was gone, taken the moment she'd gotten into the car. No one knew where she was. No one would miss her. She had no family left, no close friends, just a dead-end waitressing job at a diner that wouldn't notice if she never showed up again. Her father had made sure of that. Isolated her, kept her small and invisible, and now she was paying for his mistakes. The SUV finally pulled through iron gates into a property that looked like it belonged in a crime movie. A sprawling stone mansion surrounded by manicured gardens and armed guards, walls topped with cameras, men in dark suits patrolling the grounds with dogs. This wasn't just wealth. This was a fortress. "Out!" The scarred man opened her door. Elena's legs shook as she stepped onto the gravel driveway. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy and gray. Everything felt surreal, wrong, like she'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. "This way?" They led her through the front entrance into a house that reeked of old money and older violence. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings worth more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes. But beneath the opulence, she could feel it, the weight of blood spilled in these halls, of screams swallowed by thick walls. She was taken to a room on the second floor, large, elegant. A 4-poster bed draped in silk, a private bathroom visible through an open door, and windows that overlooked the gardens. Beautiful, and utterly terrifying. "Wait here," the scarred man said. "Someone will bring you what you need." "What I need?" Elena's voice cracked. "I need answers. I need to know what the hell is happening." "You'll get answers." He stepped into the hallway. Soon, the door closed. She heard the lock click. Elena stood frozen in the center of the room, her breath coming too fast, her mind racing through possibilities. Ransom? But she had no money. Leverage? Against who? Her father was dead. She was nobody. Worth nothing. Unless the thought made her sick. She'd heard stories, read articles, women trafficked, sold, disappeared. No, she couldn't think like that. Not yet. Not until she knew. An hour later, the door opened again. A woman entered, older, stern-faced, carrying a garment bag and a makeup case. She looked Elena up and down with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating livestock. "You're smaller than I expected," the woman said, "but this should fit." "What should fit?" Elena backed toward the window. "Who are you? Where am I?" "My name is Mrs. Harlow. I'm the estate manager. You're at the Devereaux residence." She laid the garment bag on the bed and unzipped it. "And this is your wedding dress." The world tilted. Elena stared at the white silk spilling from the bag. Delicate, expensive, beautiful. A cage made of lace. "No." The word came out strangled. "No, I'm not marrying anyone. You can't. Your father owed Luca Devereaux $50 million. Mrs. Harlow's voice was flat, matter of fact. Money he stole from this family. Money he gambled away, drank away, and wasted on schemes that went nowhere. When a man dies owing that kind of debt, his assets are seized. You're his only living asset. I'm a person, and you'll be treated as such. Mr. Devereaux doesn't want a slave. He wants a wife. I don't even know him." "You will." Mrs. Harlow opened the makeup case. "The ceremony is in 3 hours. I suggest you shower and let me help you look presentable. Fighting won't change what's happening, girl. It'll just make it harder on yourself." Elena wanted to scream, to tear the dress to pieces, to shatter every window in this godforsaken room and run until her lungs gave out. But the woman's eyes held something that stopped her. Not cruelty. Pity. This had happened before. To other women. And fighting hadn't saved them. "What happens if I refuse?" Elena whispered. Mrs. Harlow's expression softened, just barely. "Then men less patient than Mr. Devereaux will find other uses for you. You're young, pretty. There are markets for that." She picked up a hairbrush. "Luca Devereaux is offering you his name, his protection, and a life in this house. It's not freedom, but it's survival. I'd take it if I were you." 3 hours later, Elena stood in front of a full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself. The dress fit perfectly, a cruel irony. White silk that hugged her waist and flowed to the floor in elegant waves. Her dark hair had been curled and pinned, her face painted with makeup that made her look older, sophisticated, like someone who belonged in this world, like a bride, not a prisoner. "It's time," Mrs. Harlow said from the doorway. Elena's reflection stared back at her with wide, terrified eyes. She looked like a ghost, already dead. The ceremony was held in the estate's private chapel, a cold Gothic space that felt more like a mausoleum than a place of worship. No guests filled the pews, just guards lining the walls, their expressions unreadable, witnesses to a transaction, not a union, and at the altar, waiting in a black suit that probably cost more than her entire life, Luca Devereaux. Elena had expected a monster, some scarred, brutal thing that looked like violence personified, but the man watching her walk down the aisle was beautiful. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, sharp jaw, high cheekbones, and eyes, Christ, his eyes, so dark they were almost black, fixed on her with an intensity that made her stumble. He didn't look at her like property. He looked at her like she was the only thing in the room, the only thing that mattered, and that was more terrifying than any monster could be. The officiant, a nervous man who avoided eye contact, began reciting words Elena didn't hear. Her heart was pounding too loud. Her hands were shaking. She felt like she might pass out. "Do you, Elena Marie Voss, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" No. No, she didn't. She didn't choose this, didn't want this, didn't. "I do." The words fell from her lips like stones. "And do you, Luca Dante Devereaux, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Luca's gaze never left hers. "I do." His voice was deep, steady, final. "Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The officiant closed his book quickly, like he wanted to escape. No one said the rest. No one told Luca to kiss his bride. This wasn't that kind of wedding, but Luca stepped forward anyway. Elena's breath caught as he reached for her, but he didn't grab, didn't force. His hand lifted slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her chin, tilting her face up gently. "Breathe," he murmured, so quiet only she could hear. "You're safe." Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. It wasn't violent, wasn't claiming, just soft, warm. A kiss that tasted like promises she didn't understand. When he pulled back, his thumb traced her cheekbone once before he released her. "Come," he said, offering his arm. "Let's go home." The reception was even stranger than the ceremony. No celebration, no cake or champagne, just Elena and Luca seated at opposite ends of a long dining table in a room big enough to echo. Guards stood at the doors. Mrs. Harlow served food Elena couldn't taste. The silence was suffocating. Luca didn't speak, just watched her with that unnerving focus, like he was memorizing every breath she took. Finally, Elena couldn't stand it anymore. "Why?" Her voice cracked the quiet like breaking glass. Luca set down his fork. "Why what?" "Why marry me? If you wanted revenge for what my father did, there are easier ways, crueler ways." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "So why this?" For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he stood, moving around the table with the fluid grace of a predator. Elena's muscles locked as he approached, but he stopped a respectful distance away, crouching so they were eye level. "Because I've been watching you for 3 years," he said quietly. Ice flooded her veins. "What?" "Your father stole from me 5 years ago. I tracked him down within 6 months. I could have killed him then. Should have." Luca's jaw tightened. "But I saw you, coming home from your shift at the diner, tired, bruised from carrying trays all day. And you stopped to help an old woman carry her groceries up 4 flights of stairs. No one asked you to, you just did it." Elena couldn't breathe. "I started watching after that. I told myself it was surveillance, making sure your father wasn't hiding assets. But it wasn't." His gaze dropped to her hands, clenched in her lap. "It was you. The way you smiled at customers who treated you like dirt. The way you read books on your breaks. The way you existed in my world without being touched by it. You were light in a life that's only ever been dark. So you stalked me." Anger cut through her fear. "You watched me like some creep, and when my father died, you took me as payment. I saved you." His voice hardened. "You think you were the only one who knew your father died? 3 other families wanted pieces of him, and when they couldn't get him, they'd have come for you, sold you, used you, destroyed you." He stood abruptly. "I claimed you first because I'm the only one who won't hurt you, because I've wanted you since the moment I saw you help that woman, and because I'm selfish enough to keep what I want." Elena's hands trembled. "You don't even know me." I know you're kind in a world that punishes kindness. I know you're strong enough to survive a father who broke you down to nothing. I know you're terrified right now, but you haven't cried once." His expression softened just slightly. "And I know I'll spend the rest of my life earning the choice you didn't get to make today. You can't earn something you stole. Watch me." He turned and walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "Mrs. Harlow will show you to your room. It's yours. Private. I won't come in without permission. You have the run of the house and grounds, but don't try to leave. The guards have orders to stop you, gently, but they will stop you. Anything you need, ask. Anything you want, ask. I'm a lot of terrible things, Elena, but I'm not a liar and I'm not a rapist. You're my wife, not my prisoner." "Those things aren't mutually exclusive," Elena shot back. Luca's smile was grim. "No, they're not. But I'm going to try like hell to make you forget that." Then he was gone, leaving her alone in a dining room that suddenly felt cavernous. The room Mrs. Harlow led her to was even more opulent than the first. A suite, really. Bedroom, sitting area, walk-in closet filled with clothes in exactly her size. Another reminder that Luca had been watching her long before today. "Get some rest," Mrs. Harlow said, her tone almost gentle. "Tomorrow will be easier." Elena doubted that. but she was too exhausted to argue. The moment the door closed, she collapsed onto the bed and finally let herself break. Not crying, just crumbling. Her body shook with silent sobs she wouldn't let escape because she had a horrible feeling someone was still watching, still measuring her reactions. She'd married a stranger, a criminal, a man who'd confessed to stalking her for years and called it salvation. And the worst part, the part that made her sick, was that some tiny, traitorous piece of her had felt something when he'd looked at her, when he'd kissed her, when he'd said she was light in his darkness. She hated herself for it, hated him more. But hate wouldn't get her out of this. Hate wouldn't survive in a house built on violence. So Elena did what she'd always done. She buried the fear, swallowed the tears, and started planning. If Luca Devereaux wanted a wife, she'd give him one, compliant, quiet, exactly what he expected. And when he stopped watching so closely, when he trusted her enough to let his guard down, she'd disappear. 3 days passed in a strange, surreal fog. Elena learned the estate's layout, memorized guard rotations, tested boundaries. Every door she tried was unlocked, except the ones leading outside. Every guard she passed nodded respectfully, but positioned themselves to block exits. The message was clear. She could move freely within her cage, but the cage had walls. Luca kept his distance. She saw him only at dinner, a nightly ritual where they sat at that absurdly long table and pretended to eat, while silence stretched between them. He asked polite questions. How was her day? Did she need anything? Was her room comfortable? She gave polite answers. Fine. No. Yes. It was excruciating. On the fourth night, something shifted. Elena was in the library, a massive room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, when Luca appeared in the doorway. She thought she was alone. Had let herself relax, curled in an armchair with a worn copy of Jane Eyre she'd found tucked in a corner. You like the classics? It wasn't a question. Elena's grip tightened on the book. I like stories where the heroine gets a choice. Luca stepped inside, hands in his pockets. Casual, unthreatening. Jane chose Rochester, after he stopped lying to her. Fair point. He moved to the bookshelf, running his fingers along the spines. I had these brought in for you, Mrs. Harlow said you liked to read. Of course she did, because he'd watched her, studied her, built this golden cage with bars shaped exactly like her preferences. Thank you, Elena said flatly. You don't have to thank me for basic decency. Don't I? You're the one who set the bar so low. Luca's laugh was unexpected, rough and genuine. You have a sharp tongue when you're not terrified. Who says I'm not terrified? Your hands. He nodded at the book. You're holding it like a weapon, but you haven't thrown it at me. That's progress. Despite herself, Elena's lips twitched, almost a smile. She crushed it. What do you want? To talk to you. Actually talk, not just perform civility at dinner. We have nothing to talk about. We have everything to talk about. Luca pulled a chair closer, not too close, and sat. You're my wife. I'd like to know you. You've been watching me for 3 years. What's left to know? Everything that matters. His gaze was steady, intense. I know what you do, not who you are. I know you're kind to strangers, but I don't know what makes you laugh. I know you read, but I don't know what you dream about. I know you survived your father, but I don't know what you want now that he's gone. Elena's throat tightened. I want to leave. Besides that. There is no besides that. You stole my life. Your father stole your life. Luca's voice hardened. You worked yourself to exhaustion for a man who drank away every penny you earned. You had no friends because he isolated you. No future because he made sure you stayed small and scared. I didn't steal your life, Elena. I inherited the ruins of it, and I'm offering you something different. A different cage. A partnership. She laughed bitterly. You don't partner with someone you force to marry you. No. You start by forcing them, and you spend every day after trying to make it real. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I won't apologize for taking you. I won't pretend I gave you a choice, but I will give you one now, every day. Choose to hate me, I'll accept it. Choose to ignore me, I'll leave you alone. Or choose to let me try, to prove I can be more than the monster who bought you with your father's debt. Elena's hands shook. And if I choose to leave? Luca's expression shuddered. I can't let you go. Not yet. The families who wanted you don't forget. You walk out those gates, you'll be dead or worse within a week. His jaw clenched. But if you stay, if you let me protect you, if you give me time to clean up the mess your father made, I'll give you a choice. Real freedom, money, a new identity, a life anywhere you want. When? When it's safe. When I've eliminated every threat. How long? I don't know. Honesty, at least. It didn't make her feel better. Elena stood abruptly. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Luca stood too, but didn't follow as she headed for the door. Elena. She stopped. Didn't turn around. I meant what I said at the wedding. You're safe here. With me. A pause. I know that doesn't mean much yet, but I'll keep saying it until you believe it. Elena walked away without responding. But later, alone in her room, she found herself thinking about his words. About the way he looked at her. Not with the possessive hunger she'd expected, but with something rawer, more desperate. Like he needed her to be his salvation as much as he claimed to be hers. It didn't change anything, but it scared her more than the alternative. But 2 weeks into her captivity, because that's what it was, no matter how he dressed it up, Elena made her first real mistake. She asked about his work. They were in the garden, of all places. Elena had taken to walking the grounds every afternoon, and Luca had started joining her, silent at first, then making small observations, the weather, the roses blooming early, careful, neutral topics. This time, though, she broke the script. What do you do? This question came out sharper than she intended. I know you're what you are, but what does that actually mean? Day to day? Luca was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I run an organization that controls most of the East Coast's import operations, legitimate and otherwise. Otherwise meaning illegal. Yes. Drugs? No. I don't touch narcotics, too messy, too much collateral damage. He plucked a rose from a nearby bush, examining it. Weapons, information, protection. I provide services to people who can't go to the authorities. You mean criminals? I mean people the system failed. Yes, some are criminals, some are just desperate. He offered her the rose. She didn't take it. He set it on the bench between them. It's not clean work, it's not noble, but it's what I inherited, and I've made it less monstrous than it was. Less monstrous, Elena repeated. You still kill people. Yes. No hesitation. No justification, just truth. Something twisted in her chest. How many? Do you really want to know? Yes. Luca turned to face her fully. 37. By my own hand. More if you count the orders I've given. His eyes were dark, empty. Most deserved it. Some didn't. I live with that. I don't ask for forgiveness because I won't stop. This is who I am, Elena. This is the man you married. She should have been horrified, disgusted, should have run back to the house and locked herself in her room. Instead, she found herself asking, the ones who didn't deserve it, why? Because someone more powerful ordered it. Because mercy looked like weakness. Because I was younger and stupider and didn't know there was another way. His voice roughened. I can't undo those deaths, can't make them right. But I've tried to be different since he stopped himself. Since when? Since I saw you help that woman with her groceries. Elena's breath caught. You looked at her like she mattered, Luca continued quietly, like her struggle was worth stopping for. And I realized I hadn't looked at anyone like that in years. Everyone in my world is a transaction, a tool, a threat. But you saw a person, and I thought, maybe if I could be the kind of man who deserved someone like you, I could be something better. That's not fair, Elena whispered. You can't put that on me. Your redemption isn't my responsibility. I know. You didn't ask for this. Any of it. He stood, looking down at her with something achingly close to regret. But you're here anyway, and I'm selfish enough to hope that maybe, just maybe, some of your light rubs off. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her alone with a rose and a truth she didn't want to accept. Luca Devereaux was a killer. a criminal, a man who'd stolen her freedom, but he was also broken and trying, and looking at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. And Elena had no idea what to do with that. The shift happened slowly, imperceptibly at first. Luca stopped hovering, started trusting her with small freedoms, access to his office, permission to use the phone, monitored, but still. Conversations that went beyond surface pleasantries. And Elena, despite every instinct screaming at her to stay distant, started noticing things. The way Luca never raised his voice, even when his men brought him bad news. The way he listened when she spoke, like her words actually mattered. The way he looked exhausted some mornings, like he'd spent the night cleaning up horrors she didn't want to imagine. She learned he took his coffee black, that he taught himself to read Russian and Italian because his father had mocked him for being too American, that he hated guns despite being an excellent shot, that he played piano when he thought no one was listening, haunting, melancholic pieces that made her chest ache. She learned he was human, and that terrified her more than the monster ever had. 1 month after the wedding, Elena made her second mistake. She intervened. A man was brought to the estate in the middle of dinner, dragged, really, by 2 guards, beaten, bloody, begging. "Please, Mr. Devereaux, I can explain. You stole from me, Marcus." Luca's voice was cold, detached. $300,000. Did you think I wouldn't notice? My daughter needed surgery, so you stole from me instead of asking. Luca stood, and Elena saw the shift, the shuddering of whatever humanity had been there moments before. "Take him to the East Wing. Make it quick." "No!" The word was out before Elena could stop it. Everyone froze. The guards. Marcus. Luca. Luca turned to her slowly. "Go to your room, Elena." "No," she said again, standing on shaking legs. He was desperate. His daughter is not my problem. "But you could help." "I could." Luca's gaze was flat, dangerous. "I could help every desperate father who steals from me. And then I'd be seen as weak. And then I'd be dead within a year. And you'd be passed to whoever killed me. Is that what you want?" "I want you to show mercy. Mercy is a luxury I can't afford." "Bullshit." Elena's voice rose. "You told me you were trying to be different, better. This is how you do it. Not by killing everyone who crosses you, but by choosing when to show mercy. When to be more than the monster everyone expects." Silence. Luca stared at her like she'd slapped him. Then, slowly, he looked at Marcus. "How much does your daughter need?" Marcus blinked through swollen eyes. What? "For the surgery." "How much?" 50,000. "I'll pay it, and you'll work off the debt you owe me. Clean, legal work, 10 years. Luca's voice was sharp, final. "But if you ever steal from me again, I'll kill you and everyone you love, understood?" Yes, sir. Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank my wife." Luca gestured to the guards. "Take him to medical. Get him patched up. Then find out where his daughter is, and make sure she gets the best care available." The guards hesitated, shocked, then moved quickly to obey. When they were alone, Luca turned to Elena. His expression was unreadable. "That," he said quietly, "was either the bravest or stupidest thing you've ever done." Elena's hands were shaking. "Probably both. You undermined me in front of my men. You were about to kill a desperate father. I was about to maintain order. You were about to prove you're exactly what everyone thinks you are." She stepped closer, heart pounding. "You told me you wanted to be different. This is different." Luca's jaw worked. For a moment, she thought he might explode, might show her the violence she'd been waiting for. Instead, he laughed, low, rough, almost disbelieving. "You're going to get me killed," he said, shaking his head. "Or get yourself killed, I haven't decided which. So I can do it again?" His eyes met hers, and something in them made her breath catch. Heat, admiration, something dangerous and tender all at once. "Yeah," he said softly. "You can do it again." Then he crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her. Not gently this time. Not like the wedding. This kiss was fierce, claiming, desperate, like he was drowning and she was air. Elena gasped against his mouth. And instead of pulling away, she kissed him back. It was insane. Stupid. She barely knew him. Didn't trust him. Shouldn't want this. But his hands were gentle despite the intensity, and he tasted like whiskey and danger and something she couldn't name. And for one breathless moment, she let herself forget everything except the way he made her feel. Seen. Valued. Real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers. "You're dangerous," he whispered. "So are you." "I know. That's why this scares me." He stepped back before she could respond, running a hand through his hair. "I have work to finish. We'll talk later." Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with a racing heart and the terrifying realization that somewhere between captivity and defiance, something had shifted. She didn't hate him anymore. She wasn't sure what she felt, but it wasn't hate, and that changed everything. The kiss haunted her for days. Elena tried to pretend it hadn't happened, that she hadn't kissed him back, that her heart hadn't stuttered when his hands had cupped her face like she was something precious. But every time she sat across from Luca at dinner, every time their eyes met in passing, she felt it again. That dangerous pull toward a man who'd bought her like property and somehow made her feel more alive than she had in years. It terrified her. What terrified her more was that Luca seemed equally unsettled. He'd grown careful around her, cautious, like she was a grenade he didn't know how to hold. He still joined her for meals, still walked with her in the gardens. But there was a new tension thrumming between them, something electric and unspoken. Neither of them mentioned the kiss. Neither of them could forget it. A week after the incident with Marcus, Elena woke to sounds she didn't recognize. Raised voices, running footsteps, the distant slam of doors. She sat up in the pre-dawn darkness, her pulse already racing. Something was wrong. Before she could cross to the window, her bedroom door burst open. Mrs. Harlow rushed in, still in her nightgown, her usually composed face tight with fear. "Get dressed," she said sharply. "Quickly, dark clothes, nothing that will slow you down." Elena's stomach dropped. "What's happening?" "The Kozlov family is making a move. They've breached the perimeter, Mrs." Harlow was already pulling clothes from the closet. Jeans, a dark sweater, boots. "Mr. Devereaux wants you in the safe room until this is over." "The Kozlovs?" Elena yanked the sweater over her head with shaking hands. "Who are they?" "Russians. They've been trying to expand into Luca's territory for months. They must have decided tonight was their opportunity." She thrust the boots at Elena. "Put these on. Now!" Through the window, Elena could see muzzle flashes in the distance. Hear the sharp crack of gunfire. The estate that had felt like a fortress suddenly felt like a war zone. "How many?" she whispered. "Too many." Mrs. Harlow grabbed her arm. "Come on!" They ran through hallways Elena had memorized, but everything looked different in the chaos. Guards rushed past them, weapons drawn. Somewhere below, glass shattered. A man screamed, cut off abruptly. Mrs. Harlow pulled her into what looked like a study, shoving books aside on a shelf to reveal a keypad. She punched in a code, and the entire bookcase swung inward with a pneumatic hiss. "Inside!" she ordered. Elena hesitated at the threshold of the hidden room. It was small, windowless, lined with monitors showing security feeds from around the estate. She could see the firefight unfolding in real time, bodies on the ground, Luca's men taking cover, and there, Luca himself moving through the chaos with terrifying precision. No hesitation, no fear, just cold, calculated violence. Elena watched him put 3 bullets in a man's chest without flinching. "Mrs. Harlow, he'll be fine. He survived worse." The older woman's voice was firm, but her hands trembled as she activated the monitors. "This room is reinforced. Even if they breach the house, they won't find you. Do not open this door for anyone except Mr. Devereaux or myself. Do you understand?" "You're leaving?" "I have to help coordinate the defense. You'll be safe here." "Wait." But Mrs. Harlow was already closing the door, sealing Elena inside. The lock engaged with a heavy thud, and Elena was alone with nothing but monitors showing a battle she couldn't stop, and a phone that connected only to Luca's security team. She sank into the chair facing the screens, her whole body shaking. This was his world, this violence, this brutality. She'd known it intellectually, but seeing it, watching men die on the manicured lawns she'd walked through just yesterday, made it visceral, real. Luca appeared on one of the screens, taking cover behind a marble fountain. He was shouting orders Elena couldn't hear through the silent feed. Blood streaked his shirt. She couldn't tell if it was his. Her chest constricted painfully. Don't die, she thought desperately. Please don't die. The thought should have shocked her. She should want him gone, should see this as an opportunity for freedom if the Kozlovs won. But all she could think was that if Luka died, she'd never know what they could have been. Would never get to understand this strange, impossible thing growing between them. The battle lasted 47 minutes. Elena counted every second on the digital clock in the corner of the monitors, watching as Luka's men slowly pushed back the invaders. Bodies accumulated on both sides. The rose garden she'd loved was shredded by gunfire. The fountain where Luka had taken cover was pocked with bullet holes. Finally, the last of the attackers either fell or fled. Luka stood in the center of the carnage, chest heaving, guns still raised. Even through the grainy feed, Elena could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he scanned the grounds for remaining threats. He was alive. She pressed her hand to her mouth, swallowing back a sob she didn't understand. 20 minutes later, the door locks disengaged. Elena scrambled to her feet as it swung open. Luka stood on the other side, looking like he'd walked through hell. Blood splattered his face and clothes. A cut above his eyebrow dripped red down his temple. His hands were still shaking with adrenaline, but his eyes, those dark, intense eyes, locked onto hers with something that looked like relief. Elena. Her name came out rough, broken. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. Luka crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. He held her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had just tried to kill him. Elena felt his heart hammering against her cheek, felt the tremor in his hands as they gripped her shoulders. I'm okay, she whispered. I'm okay. I know. I made sure of it. He pulled back just enough to scan her face, his hands coming up to cup her cheeks. You're safe. You're safe. So are you. Something cracked in his expression. Yeah, I am. Then he kissed her like he'd been drowning, and she was oxygen. Elena kissed him back without thinking, her hands fisting in his ruined shirt, tasting copper and desperation. This wasn't like the first kiss. This was raw, urgent. 2 people clinging to each other in the aftermath of violence. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Luka rested his forehead against hers. I was terrified, he admitted quietly. When I heard they'd breached the perimeter, all I could think was that I couldn't lose you. Not now, not before... He stopped himself. Before what? Before you chose me. His voice was barely a whisper. Really chose me. Not because you were trapped or scared, but because you wanted to. Elena's throat tightened. Luka, I know I don't deserve it. I know I forced this. But Elena, if something had happened to you tonight, his hands tightened on her face. I would have burned the world down. She believed him. That was the terrifying part. She believed every word. How many did you lose? She asked instead. 4 men dead. 6 injured. His jaw clenched. The Kozlovs lost twice that, but they made their point. Which is? That I'm vulnerable. That caring about you makes me weak. He stepped back, running a hand through his blood-matted hair. They'll come again, harder, smarter. They'll use you to get to me. Then let me go. The words came out before she could stop them. Give me that new identity you promised. Send me away. I'll disappear, and you'll be safe. No. The word was sharp, final. I can't. You mean you won't? I mean I can't. Luka's eyes were wild, desperate. I tried, Elena. After that kiss, I tried to convince myself to let you go, to do the right thing. But I can't. I'm too selfish, too broken. I need you here. He turned away, his hands clenching into fists. I need you to make me believe I can be something other than this. Elena stared at his back, at the rigid line of his shoulders, and felt something shift inside her chest, something dangerous and tender and completely insane. Then stop hiding from me, she said quietly. Luka turned slowly. What? You want me to choose you? Then let me see you. All of you. Not just the man who plays piano and drinks black coffee. Not just the monster who kills people. All of it. She stepped closer. Show me who Luca Devereaux really is, and maybe I'll choose to stay. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then slowly, he nodded. Okay, he said. Okay. He offered his hand. Elena took it and let him lead her out of the safe room and into the ruins of a battle she was only beginning to understand. The next morning, Elena woke to find Luca sitting in the chair beside her bed. Not in her bed, not touching her. Just sitting there in the pre-dawn light, watching her sleep with an expression that made her chest ache. How long have you been there? She asked, voice rough with sleep. A while. He didn't look away, didn't apologize. I needed to see you breathing, to know last night was real and you're still here. Elena sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. Did you sleep at all? No, too much to do, bodies to move, damage to assess, messages to send. Messages? To the Kozlovs, so they know what happens when they come for what's mine. His voice was cold, empty. The voice of a man who'd spent the night doing terrible things. Elena should have been frightened, should have remembered that this was who he was, but all she could think was that he looked exhausted, haunted, human. Come here, she said quietly. Luca's eyes widened slightly. Elena, I'm not asking you to do anything, just come here. Slowly, he stood and crossed to the bed. Sat on the edge, careful not to touch her. The mattress dipped under his weight. Elena shifted, making room. Lie down. I'm covered in... I haven't showered. I shouldn't... Luca, lie down. He stared at her for a heartbeat longer, then obeyed. Stretched out on top of the covers, still fully dressed in clothes stiff with dried blood. His body was rigid, uncomfortable. Elena turned on her side to face him. When was the last time someone took care of you? The question seemed to shock him. I don't know. Then let me. Just for right now, just this once. She reached out and brushed the hair back from his forehead, her fingers gentle against his skin. Luca's eyes closed like the touch hurt, like kindness was a foreign language he'd forgotten how to speak. You don't have to do this, he said roughly. I know. I don't deserve it. I know that too. Her hand moved to his cheek, her thumb tracing the sharp line of his jaw. But I'm doing it anyway. Something broke in his expression. He turned his face into her palm, his breath shuddering out like he'd been holding it for years. I'm so tired, he whispered. I'm so goddamn tired of being this. Then rest. Just for a little while. Elena kept stroking his hair, his face, gentle touches that asked for nothing and gave everything. And slowly, impossibly, she felt the tension drain from his body, felt him relax into the mattress, into her touch. Within minutes, he was asleep. Elena watched him in the growing light, this dangerous man who'd become her husband, her captor, her something. She didn't have a word for what he was to her now, didn't know if such a word existed. But as she watched him sleep, truly sleep, without the careful guard he always maintained, she felt something settle in her chest, a decision she hadn't known she was making. She wasn't leaving, not yet, maybe not ever. Because somewhere between the forced marriage and the stolen kisses and the violence that had nearly destroyed them both, she'd started to care. To see past the monster to the man underneath. The man who played haunting melodies on the piano. Who showed mercy when she asked. Who looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to his humanity. It was insane. Stupid. Stockholm Syndrome, probably. But it was real. And Elena had been invisible for so long that being seen, truly seen, felt like coming alive. Even if the man doing the scene was a killer, even if staying meant becoming part of his dark world, even if everything about this was wrong, she'd choose it anyway. When Luca woke 3 hours later, Elena was still there, still watching him, still touching him, like he was something worth caring for. Hi, she said softly. Hi. His voice was rough with sleep, vulnerable. I fell asleep. You needed it. I got blood on your sheets. I have others. Luca sat up slowly, scrubbing a hand over his face. I should go. Shower. Change. Let you... Luca. He stopped, looking at her with those dark, cautious eyes. I'm not leaving. Elena said. I'm choosing to stay. Not because I'm trapped. Not because I'm scared. Because I want to understand this. Us. Whatever this is. Luca's breath caught. Elena, I'm not saying I love you. I'm not saying I forgive you for how this started, but I'm saying I'm here. Really here. And I want to know who you are when you're not trying to be the monster everyone expects. For a long moment, Luca just stared at her. Then he reached out, cupping her face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from hands that had killed men just hours ago. I'll show you, he promised. Everything, no more hiding. Then start now. Tell me something real, something you've never told anyone. Luca's thumb traced her cheekbone as he considered. Then, quietly, I was 8 when my father made me kill someone for the first time. Elena's breath froze. His name was Michael. He was my father's accountant. He'd been skimming money. Small amounts, barely noticeable. Luca's voice was distant, detached. My father found out. He dragged me into his office, put a gun in my hand, and told me to shoot. I said no. I was 8. I didn't understand. So he beat me until I couldn't stand, then made me watch while he tortured Michael for hours. And when Michael finally died, my father said, "This is what happens when you're weak, when you show mercy. Remember it." Tears burned Elena's eyes. Luca, I remembered it for years. I became exactly what he wanted. Hard, ruthless, unbreakable. I killed when he ordered, hurt people when he demanded it. And I told myself it was survival, that I had no choice. He looked at her then, and his eyes were raw. But I did have a choice. I could have been different, could have found another way. Instead, I became him. And by the time he died and I took over, I didn't know how to be anything else. Until you saw me help that woman with her groceries, Elena whispered. Until I saw you help that woman with her groceries, he confirmed. And I realized I'd spent 20 years becoming a monster when all I really wanted was to be someone worth loving. Elena's hand covered his on her cheek. You're not your father. I've done things he would have been proud of. But you're trying to be different. That matters. Does it? If I'm still killing people, still running this empire, still, it matters, Elena said firmly. Because you're choosing to show mercy when you can. Because you're questioning yourself instead of just accepting what you are. Because you're letting me see this instead of hiding behind the monster. She leaned into his touch. You're not irredeemable, Luca. You're just lost. And you're going to save me? His smile was bitter. That's not your job, Elena. No, it's not. But maybe we can save each other. Luca's expression cracked. I don't know how to do this. How to be someone you'd want. Then we'll figure it out together. He kissed her then, slow, tender, a kiss that tasted like promises and hope, and all the broken pieces they were trying to fit together. When they finally pulled apart, Luca rested his forehead against hers. I need to shower, he said quietly. Clean up. Deal with the aftermath of last night. But after, will you have dinner with me? Not in that ridiculous dining room, somewhere smaller, just us. Elena smiled. I'd like that. Yeah? Yeah. He stood reluctantly, like leaving her was physically painful. At the door he paused. Thank you, he said. For staying, for choosing to try, for, his voice roughened, for making me believe I could be something other than what I was made to be. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with a racing heart and the terrifying knowledge that she was falling for a man who'd bought her with blood money and somehow made her feel more precious than gold. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was real. And Elena had stopped trying to fight it. Dinner that night was different. Luca had set up a small table on the balcony off his study, a space Elena had never been invited to before. Candles flickered in the evening breeze. Wine waited in crystal glasses. The table was intimate, private, a world away from the formal dining room where they usually performed their marriage. You did this yourself? Elena asked as Luca pulled out her chair. I had help, but I wanted it to feel different. He sat across from her, looking almost nervous. I wanted to show you I could be normal, even if it's just pretend. It's not pretend if you mean it. I mean it. The meal was simple. Pasta, salad, nothing extravagant. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. the tension of the previous night slowly dissipating into something softer. "Tell me about your mother," Elena said eventually. "You've told me about your father, but never her." Luca's hand tightened on his fork. "She died when I was 6. Cancer, quick and brutal. My father never recovered, or maybe he did, and the cruelty was always there. I don't know." He took a sip of wine. "I barely remember her. Just impressions. The smell of her perfume, the way she hummed while she cooked. She used to read to me before bed, fairy tales, stories where the hero always won and love conquered everything. She sounds wonderful." She was. And then she was gone, and my father made sure I understood that love was weakness, that caring about people got you killed. His eyes met hers. I believed him for a long time. And now? Now I think he was wrong. I think love is the only thing that makes us human, the only thing worth fighting for. He reached across the table, offering his hand. "I think my mother would have liked you." Elena took his hand, their fingers intertwining. "I think I would have liked her too." They stayed like that for a long moment, hands joined, the city lights twinkling in the distance. It felt surreal, peaceful, like they were just a normal couple having dinner instead of a mafia boss and the woman he'd bought with her father's debts. "Can I ask you something?" Luca said quietly. "Anything. Do you regret it? Intervening with Marcus, showing me I could choose mercy." Elena considered. "No. Do you?" "I should. It made me look weak, set a precedent I'll have to manage. But," he squeezed her hand, "I've never felt more powerful than when I chose to let him live. When I chose you over the monster everyone expects." "Then it wasn't weakness." "No, it was you, making me better." They finished dinner slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Elena told him about the books she loved, the places she dreamed of traveling but never could. Luca told her about the estate's history, the gardens his mother had planted, the piano she'd taught him to play before she died. It was easy, natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. When the meal ended, Luca stood and offered his hand again. "Dance with me?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "There's no music." "There is if you listen." He pulled out his phone and soft piano music filled the air. The same haunting melody Elena had heard him play late at night when he thought no one was listening. "You recorded yourself playing?" "I wanted to remember what it felt like, to create something beautiful instead of destroying things." He drew her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. "Dance with me, Elena. Let me pretend, just for tonight, that this is real. That you chose me because you wanted to, not because you had no choice." Elena's throat tightened. "It is real, Luca. I am choosing you. Even knowing what I am? Especially knowing what you are, and what you're trying to become." They swayed together on the balcony, the city spread out below them like stars. Luca held her carefully, like she might break. Elena rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heart. This was dangerous, foolish. She was falling for a man who'd kidnapped her, forced her into marriage, and showed her a world of violence she couldn't unsee. But he was also the man who looked at her like she was his salvation, who played piano in the dark, who showed mercy when she asked, who held her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. And Elena had been invisible for so long that being seen, really seen, felt like coming home. Even if home was a gilded cage. Even if the man holding her was a monster trying to be human. Even if everything about this was impossible, she'd choose it anyway. "Luca? Kiss me." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes dark and intense. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." This kiss was different from the others, slower, deeper, a kiss that tasted like promises and possibility. Luca's hands cupped her face with devastating gentleness, and Elena let herself melt into it, into him, into the impossible thing growing between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered. I'm not asking for anything. Just stay. Let me hold you. Let me fall asleep knowing you're here." Elena's answer was to take his hand and let him lead her inside. They ended up in his room, a space she'd never seen before. It was surprisingly simple. Large bed, minimal furniture, no ostentation, just clean lines and dark colors and a window overlooking the gardens. Luca hesitated at the threshold. I can sleep on the couch if you— Get in the bed, Luca. He obeyed, settling on top of the covers fully clothed. Elena climbed in beside him, curling into his side. His arm came around her immediately, holding her close. This is enough, he said quietly. Just this. You hear? Choosing to stay. Elena pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. Then this is what we'll do. For now. For now, he agreed. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two broken people finding something whole in the spaces between them. And for the first time since her father died, Elena felt safe, not because she was protected, but because she was chosen. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the warmth of another body pressed against hers. Elena woke slowly, disoriented for a moment, before memory returned. Luca's room, his bed, his arms still wrapped protectively around her waist. She turned carefully, not wanting to wake him, and found herself face to face with a version of Luca she'd never seen before. Relaxed, peaceful. The hard lines of his face softened by sleep, making him look younger, almost vulnerable. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. This was real. She'd chosen to stay, chosen to try. And lying here in the quiet morning light, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, Elena couldn't bring herself to regret it. Luca's eyes opened slowly, focusing on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Hi, he murmured, voice rough with sleep. You're still here. Where else would I be? Something flickered across his face, relief maybe, or disbelief. I kept thinking I'd wake up and you'd be gone. That last night was a dream. Elena reached up, touching his jaw gently. Not a dream. I'm here. Yeah. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. You are. They stayed like that for a long moment, just looking at each other in the morning light. Then Luca's phone buzzed violently on the nightstand, shattering the peace. He sighed, reaching for it. I have to take this. I know. Elena slipped out of bed as Luca answered, his voice immediately shifting into the cold, authoritative tone she'd come to recognize as his business voice. She padded back to her own room, showered, and changed, trying not to think too hard about how natural it had felt to wake up beside him. By the time she made it downstairs, Luca was already in his office with the door closed. She could hear raised voices through the heavy wood. An argument. Something about territory and the Kozlovs and revenge. The real world crashing back in. Elena was picking at breakfast in the small dining room when Mrs. Harlow found her. Mr. Devereaux asked me to let you know he'll be occupied most of the day, the older woman said, setting down fresh coffee. There's fallout from the attack to manage. What kind of fallout? Mrs. Harlow hesitated, then sat across from Elena with a sigh. The Kozlovs lost 12 men in the attack. They're demanding compensation, threatening retaliation, and the other families are watching to see how Mr. Devereaux handles it. What happens if he shows weakness? Then they'll all come for him, like sharks smelling blood in the water. Mrs. Harlow's expression was grim. This world doesn't forgive mercy. It sees it as an invitation. Elena thought of Marcus, of the man Luca had spared because she'd asked. He showed mercy once. Is that going to destroy him? I don't know, but I do know that in 20 years of working for this family, I've never seen Mr. Devereaux look at anyone the way he looks at you. Mrs. Harlow's voice softened. Whatever is happening between you two, it's changing him. Whether that's good or bad remains to be seen. Before Elena could respond, the office door slammed open. Luca emerged, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. He stalked past them without a word, heading for the front entrance. Elena was on her feet before she thought better of it. Luca? He stopped, turned, and she saw it then, the monster he'd been before she arrived, cold, lethal, absolutely terrifying. Not now, Elena. What happened? The Kozlovs sent a message. They took someone, one of my men. His voice was flat, dead. They're going to kill him slowly unless I turn over 3 blocks of territory and $500,000 by midnight. Elena's stomach turned. What are you going to do? What I should have done in the first place. I'm going to remind them why you don't come for what's mine. He moved toward the door again. Wait, Elena crossed to him quickly. There has to be another way. Negotiation. Compromise. There is no compromise with men who breach my home and threaten what I care about. His eyes were black ice. They want war. I'm going to give it to them. And your man, the one they took? Luca's jaw clenched. He knew the risks when he took this job. So you're just going to let him die? I'm going to make sure his death means something. Elena grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. This isn't you, not anymore. You showed mercy to Marcus. You can find another way. Marcus was different. He stole out of desperation. The Kozlovs attacked my home, nearly killed you. His voice dropped dangerously. There is no mercy for that. So all that talk about being different was just talk? About me making you better? You do make me better, but better doesn't mean weak. He pulled away from her grip. I have to go. Luca, please. But he was already gone, the door slamming behind him with brutal finality. Elena stood frozen in the foyer, her heart racing. Mrs. Harlow appeared at her elbow, her expression sympathetic. Let him go, dear. This is what he does. Who he is. No. Elena's voice was stronger than she felt. No, it's not. Not all of him. She turned and ran for the stairs, taking them two at a time. If Luca wouldn't listen, maybe she could find another way to help, to save him from becoming the monster everyone expected. She just had to figure out how. Elena spent the next 3 hours doing something she knew she shouldn't. She went through Luca's office searching for information about the Kozlovs, about the man they'd taken, about anything that could give her leverage. She found files, reports, photographs of brutal violence, evidence of the empire Luca controlled and the blood it took to maintain it. Her hands shook as she turned page after page, seeing the full scope of what she'd married into. But she also found something else. A name. Viktor Kozlov, the head of the Russian family, and an address for a restaurant he owned in the city. Elena stared at the address, her mind racing. This was insane, dangerous. Luca would lose his mind if he knew what she was thinking. But if she could talk to Viktor, if she could convince him to release Luca's man and negotiate a real peace instead of escalating into all-out war, she could save them both from more bloodshed. Before she could talk herself out of it, Elena was moving. She grabbed her phone, called for a car, one of Luca's drivers, a young man named James who'd always been kind to her, and told him she needed to go into the city. Mr. Devereaux said you're not to leave the estate, ma'am, James said nervously. Mr. Devereaux isn't here, and I'm not asking permission. I'm his wife, and I'm telling you to drive me. Elena's voice was firm, commanding, a tone she'd never used before. Now, please. James hesitated, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. The drive into the city took 40 minutes. Elena spent every second of it questioning her sanity. This was stupid, reckless. She didn't know these people, didn't know if they'd even listen to her. But she knew Luca, knew that if he went to war with the Kozlovs, more people would die, including, possibly, him. And she couldn't let that happen. The restaurant was in a part of the city Elena had never visited. Expensive, exclusive, the kind of place where men in expensive suits made deals that never appeared on paper. She walked in with her head high and her heart in her throat, approaching the hostess with what she hoped was confidence. I need to speak with Viktor Kozlov. The hostess's eyes widened. Do you have an appointment? No, but tell him Elena Devereaux is here. He'll want to see me. The woman disappeared into the back. Elena waited, acutely aware of the eyes on her. The men scattered throughout the restaurant, all watching her with varying degrees of interest and suspicion. 5 minutes later, the hostess returned. Follow me. Elena was led through the restaurant to a private room in the back, opulent, dark wood and leather. And at the head of the table, a man who could only be Viktor Kozlov. He was older than she expected, 60s maybe. Silver hair, sharp eyes, a face that had seen violence and dished it out in equal measure. Mrs. Devereaux. His accent was thick, Russian. What an unexpected pleasure. Elena forced herself to meet his gaze. We need to talk. About your husband's impending assault on my operations, or about the fact that you've walked into my establishment without protection, making yourself the perfect bargaining chip? Victor smiled, and it was cold, predatory. You're either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both. Elena's voice didn't shake. A miracle. But I'm also the only chance you have to end this without a war that destroys both our families. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying her. Interesting. Your husband attacks my men, kills a dozen of my soldiers, and you think you can negotiate peace? Your men attacked his home first, nearly killed me in the process. You escalated this. We were making a point, and he'll make one back, a bigger one. You know his reputation. You know what he's capable of when someone threatens what he cares about. Elena stepped closer to the table. But he's also capable of mercy. I've seen it, and I'm here to offer you the same choice. What choice is that? Release his man, unharmed, negotiate a real peace, new territory lines, compensation for your losses, whatever it takes. End this before it becomes a bloodbath neither side can survive. Victor laughed. Actually, laughed. And why would I do that? I have the leverage. I have his man. I have you now, if I choose to take you. Because if you take me, Luca won't just come for you. He'll burn your entire organization to the ground. Every business, every holding, every person you've ever cared about. You think you've seen his violence? You haven't seen what he'll do for me. The room fell silent. Victor's smile faded. You love him. It wasn't a question. Elena didn't deny it. I do. And he loves me. Which means your leverage just became a death sentence if you use it. She pulled out a chair and sat, projecting a confidence she absolutely didn't feel. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to release Luca's man as a show of good faith. You're going to agree to sit down with him, with me there as mediator, and negotiate a real treaty. And in exchange, I'll convince him to give you the compensation you're asking for, maybe even one of those blocks of territory. And if I refuse, then you'll have a war with a man who has nothing left to lose, a man who will sacrifice everything, including himself, to make sure you pay for threatening me. Elena's voice was steady, clear. Is your pride worth that? Victor stared at her for a long, tense moment. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. Spoke rapid Russian that Elena couldn't follow. When he hung up, he looked at her with something that might have been respect. Your husband's man will be released within the hour, unharmed. As for the rest, he stood, buttoning his suit jacket. I'll consider your proposal, but understand this, Mrs. Devereaux. The only reason I'm even entertaining this conversation is because I see something in you that I didn't expect. What's that? Steel. You walked into the lion's den to save a man who bought you like property. That takes either love or insanity. His smile was grim. I'm curious to see which. Does it matter? Not really. Either way, you're more dangerous than you look. He moved toward the door. Go home, Mrs. Devereaux. Tell your husband I'll be in touch. And tell him if he's smart, he'll listen to you more often. Women like you are rare in this world. Elena stood on shaking legs. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This isn't over, but perhaps it doesn't have to end in blood. He paused at the threshold. One more thing. Your driver is waiting outside, but you should know, 2 of my men followed you here. They've been watching since you arrived. Elena's heart stopped. Are they? They're leaving, as a courtesy, this time. Victor's eyes were hard. Don't make me regret showing mercy, Mrs. Devereaux. I'm not as forgiving as your husband. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in the room with her racing heart and the terrifying knowledge of what she'd just done. She'd negotiated with the enemy, without permission, without backup, without any guarantee it would work. Luca was going to lose his mind. Elena made it back to the estate just as the sun was setting. She'd barely stepped through the front door when she was grabbed, gently but firmly, by one of Luca's guards. Mr. Devereaux wants to see you, now. Her stomach dropped. How much trouble am I in? The guard's expression was carefully neutral. Considerable, ma'am. She was escorted to Luca's office. The door was closed. Elena could hear raised voices inside. Luca and someone else, arguing about something she couldn't make out. The guard knocked once, then opened the door. Luca stood behind his desk, still in the clothes he'd left in that morning. But everything about him had changed. The cold fury was gone, replaced by something worse. Fear. Raw, undisguised fear. Out, he snapped at the guard. Everyone out. Now! The room emptied in seconds, leaving just the two of them. The moment the door closed, Luca crossed the space between them in 3 strides and pulled Elena into his arms. Held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You stupid, reckless, brilliant woman," he said against her hair. "What the hell were you thinking? How did you— Oh, Victor called me. Told me my wife had walked into his restaurant and negotiated the release of my man like she was brokering a corporate merger." Luca pulled back, gripping her shoulders. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? He could have taken you, killed you, used you to destroy everything. But he didn't. He listened. And he released your man, didn't he? That's not the point. That's exactly the point." Elena's voice rose to match his. "You were going to start a war. People were going to die. And I stopped it. By putting yourself in danger. By doing what you've been trying to do since I got here. Being something different. Choosing mercy over violence." She pushed against his chest. "You can't ask me to make you better and then get angry when I actually try." Luca stared at her, his chest heaving. Then, without warning, he kissed her. Hard, desperate. A kiss that tasted like fear and fury and something deeper. When he pulled back, his hands were shaking. "I got the call that you'd left the estate, and I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought they'd taken you, that I'd lost you. And Elena, I can't lose you. Not now. Not when you've become the only thing that matters." "Then don't push me away when I'm trying to help. You could have died. But I didn't. I saved your man. I bought you time to negotiate instead of going to war. I did what you would have done if pride wasn't in the way." She cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. "You taught me that mercy can be strength. I'm just showing you it's true." Luca's laugh was broken, ragged. "You're going to be the death of me. Or the saving of you." He kissed her again, softer this time, tender, like she was something precious he'd almost lost. "Victor wants to negotiate," Luca said when they finally broke apart. "He's agreed to a sit-down, with you there." "That's good, right? That's terrifying, because it means you've made an impression. They'll remember you now, use you if they can. You've painted a target on your back." "I already had one, the moment I became your wife." Elena's voice was steady. "At least now I'm choosing to be part of this instead of just being protected from it." Luca studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Okay, we do this together. But Elena—" His grip tightened. "If anything happens, if anyone so much as looks at you wrong, I'm burning that negotiation to the ground. Understood?" "Understood." "Good." He pulled her close again, resting his chin on top of her head. "My man, the one they released, his name is Daniel. He wants to thank you." "He doesn't need to He does. You saved his life. The least you can do is let him acknowledge it." Elena nodded against his chest, breathing in the scent of him. Gunpowder and expensive cologne and something uniquely Luca. "I was so scared," she admitted quietly, walking in there, facing Victor. "But I kept thinking about you, about what you'd do. And I just did it. You're braver than I am." "No, I'm just stubborn." Luca's laugh rumbled through his chest. "That too." They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped around each other, both realizing how close they'd come to losing something they hadn't even named yet. "Stay with me tonight," Luca said finally. "Not just sleeping, stay with me. Let me hold you. Let me convince myself you're real and safe, and here." Elena pulled back just enough to look at him. "I'm not going anywhere. Promise me." "I promise." He kissed her forehead gently. "Come on, let's get you fed. Then I want to hear every detail of how you convinced a Russian mobster to show mercy." "I told him you'd burn his world down if he hurt me." "Damn right I would." "I know, that's why it worked." The negotiation happened 3 days later in a neutral location, a private club neither family owned but both respected. Luca brought 4 of his best men, Victor brought 6. Elena sat between them, the only woman in a room full of predators. It was terrifying. It was also exhilarating. She watched Luca negotiate with a precision that was almost beautiful. Watched him give ground where it didn't matter and hold firm where it did. watched him transform from the man who held her at night into something cold and calculating and absolutely lethal. And she realized this was part of him too. Not just the softness he showed her, but this, the leader, the strategist, the man who could command a room with a single look. Victor was equally impressive, sharp, calculating, willing to compromise but never to surrender. They hammered out terms for 3 hours. Territory lines, compensation, less than Victor wanted but more than Luca preferred, a mutual defense pact against outside threats, and most importantly, a promise of non-aggression that both men signed in blood, literally, with a knife in their own palms, sealing the pact in the old way. When it was done, Victor stood and offered Luca his hand. To peace, however long it lasts. To peace, Luca agreed, shaking it. Then Victor turned to Elena, and to the woman who made it possible. You have my respect, Mrs. Devereaux, and my protection, should you ever need it. Elena stood, meeting his gaze steadily. Thank you. I hope we never need it. So do I. Victor smiled, and it almost looked genuine. But in this world, hope is a luxury. Luca's hand found Elena's as they left the club, his grip tight and possessive. You were amazing, he said quietly. The way you held that room's attention, the way Victor looked at you like you were an equal. Elena, you just negotiated peace between two families that have been at war for 5 years. We negotiated it, together. No, you started it. I just finished what you began. He stopped, turning to face her fully. I've never been more proud, or more terrified. You're not just my wife anymore. You're a player in this world, and that makes you valuable to everyone, including my enemies. I can handle it. I know you can. That's what scares me. He cupped her face gently. But I'm done trying to protect you from this life. If you're going to be part of it, you should be all the way in, with your eyes open and your voice heard. Elena's heart swelled. You mean that? I mean it. From now on, we're partners, equal partners, in everything. Everything? Luca's smile was slow, devastating. Everything. He kissed her right there on the street, in front of his guards and anyone watching. A kiss that was a claim and a promise and a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, Elena was breathless and smiling and more certain than ever that she'd made the right choice. This world was dark, violent, unforgiving. But standing beside Luca, facing it together, she felt stronger than she ever had in her life. Take me home, she said softly. Always. That night, everything changed. They made it through dinner, barely, before Luca pulled Elena to her feet and led her upstairs. Not to separate rooms this time. To his room. Their room, maybe. He closed the door behind them and just looked at her for a long moment. Are you sure? He asked quietly. Because once we cross this line, Elena, there's no going back. You'll be mine completely, and I'll be yours. No more pretending this is temporary or forced. This becomes real. Elena crossed to him, her hands going to his chest. It's already real. It's been real since I chose to stay. Since I walked into Victor's restaurant. Since I realized I'd rather fight beside you than run from you. Elena, I love you. The words came out strong, clear, true. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you showed mercy to Marcus. Maybe when you held me while you slept. Maybe it's been growing since the moment you looked at me at that altar, like I was something worth cherishing. But I love you, Luca. All of you. The monster, and the man, the killer, and the protector. All of it. Luca's breath caught. His hands came up to frame her face, and his eyes were bright with something that looked like tears. I've loved you since the moment I saw you help that woman, he said roughly. I've loved you through 3 years of watching you be kind in a cruel world. I've loved you through every second of this marriage, even when you hated me, and I'll love you for the rest of my life, Elena. However long or short that is. Then show me. He kissed her like a drowning man finding air, like she was salvation and sin and everything in between. And Elena kissed him back with everything she had, pouring years of invisibility and loneliness and fear into the kiss, transforming it all into this, into choosing him, into loving him, into becoming his completely. And when they finally fell into bed together, when Luca made love to her with a tenderness that made her cry and a passion that set her on fire, Elena knew she'd found something she hadn't even known she was searching for. Home. Not in a place or a person, but in the choice to love someone broken and let them love you back. In the decision to see past the monster to the man underneath. In the courage to stay when leaving would be easier. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Luca's fingers tracing idle patterns on her skin. "I'm still scared," he admitted quietly. "That I'll mess this up, that I'll hurt you, that I'll become my father and destroy the best thing that ever happened to me." Elena turned in his arms, pressing her hand over his heart. "Then we'll be scared together. And when you start becoming him, I'll pull you back. That's what partners do." "Partners," Luca repeated, smiling. "I like the sound of that." "Good, because you're stuck with me now. Best thing I ever stole." Luca Fitch. I know. You chose me, but I'm still going to take credit for having the good sense to claim you in the first place." He kissed her forehead. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me, for staying, for making me believe I could be something other than what I was made to be." His voice roughened. "For loving me when I didn't deserve it." "You deserve it now." "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure that stays true." Elena believed him. Against all logic and reason, she believed him. And as she drifted off to sleep in his arms, safe and chosen and loved, she couldn't bring herself to regret a single moment of the journey that had brought her here. Even the painful parts, even the forced beginning. Because this, lying in Luca's arms, knowing she was his and he was hers, was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. It was worth everything. 3 weeks of peace felt like a lifetime and an eye blink all at once. Elena woke each morning wrapped in Luca's arms, learning the geography of his body the way she'd once memorized the layout of the estate. The scar on his ribs from a knife fight when he was 19, the burn mark on his shoulder from a cigarette his father had pressed there when he was 12, the calluses on his hands from the gun he'd learned to shoot before he could properly read. Each mark told a story. Each story made her love him more. They fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Breakfast together, where Luca read the financial reports, while Elena worked through Italian lessons he'd insisted on teaching her. Afternoons where she sat in on his meetings, at his insistence, not hers, learning the intricacies of the world she'd married into. Evenings in the garden or the library, stealing moments of quiet between the chaos of running an empire. And nights. Nights where they came together like they were trying to make up for all the years they'd spent alone. Where Luca worshipped her body like she was sacred and she gave herself to him completely, no more walls between them. It was perfect, which should have been Elena's first warning that it couldn't last. The call came on a Tuesday morning while they were still in bed. Luca's phone buzzed, and Elena felt him tense immediately against her. "It's Marcus," he said quietly, checking the screen. "Something's wrong." He answered, and Elena watched his face transform. The softness that had been there moments ago vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "When?" Pause. "How many?" Another pause. "No, don't engage. Fall back to the secondary location. I'm on my way." He hung up and was out of bed before Elena could ask questions, already pulling on clothes with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "What happened?" "The Castellanos hit one of our warehouses. They took the entire shipment, $2 million in merchandise, and killed 3 of our guards." Luca's voice was flat, controlled. But Elena could see the fury simmering beneath. This is a declaration of war. Elena's blood ran cold. "The Castellanos? I thought Victor was our only threat." "Victor was the threat we knew about. The Castellanos have been quiet for months, letting us think they'd accepted the new territory lines." He strapped on his shoulder holster, checking his gun with practiced ease. "Apparently they were just waiting for the right moment to strike." "What are you going to do?" Luca paused, looking at her with an expression that made her heart sink. "What I have to. They killed my men, Elena. Stole from me. If I don't respond, every family on the East Coast will see it as weakness. So you're going to kill them back, start another war." "I'm going to defend what's mine." "And how is that different from what the Kozlovs did? What you almost went to war over before I stopped you?" Elena climbed out of bed, wrapping herself in a robe. "Luca, we just negotiated peace, If you retaliate now, you'll destroy everything we built. They destroyed it when they attacked my people. He crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. I know you want me to be different, better, and I'm trying. But there are lines, Elena, rules in this world. If I let this stand, I'm dead within a month. Then find another way. The way we did with Victor. There is no other way with the Castellanos. They're not like Victor. They don't respect strength through negotiation. They only understand violence. His jaw clenched. I have to go. Stay here. Don't leave the estate. I'll have extra guards posted. Luca? But he was already kissing her, hard, desperate, like it might be the last time. I love you, he said against her lips. No matter what happens, remember that. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with a sick feeling of dread in her stomach. She tried to follow his orders. Really, she did. She stayed in the estate, paced the rooms they'd shared, attempted to read and couldn't focus on a single word. Mrs. Harlow brought her lunch that she didn't eat. Guards checked on her every hour. But by afternoon, Elena couldn't take it anymore. She needed to know what was happening, needed to see if Luca was okay. She found James in his garage, the young driver who'd taken her to Victor's restaurant. I need you to take me into the city, she said. James looked terrified. Ma'am, Mr. Devereaux specifically said, I know what he said, but I'm asking you to trust me. Please, James, I need to find him before he does something we can't come back from. The young man hesitated, clearly torn between his orders and the pleading in her eyes. Finally, he nodded. If he kills me for this, I'm haunting you. Deal. The city felt different now, dangerous. Elena watched the streets pass, seeing the world Luca inhabited with new eyes. The restaurants and clubs that laundered money. The warehouses that stored illegal shipments. The people on the corners who reported to someone who reported to someone who eventually reported to her husband. This was his kingdom, built on blood and fear and careful negotiation. And she was about to walk into the heart of it. James took her to an industrial area on the waterfront. Abandoned buildings and rusted shipping containers. The kind of place where bad things happened and no one asked questions. He's in there, James said, pointing to a warehouse with blacked-out windows. But ma'am, I really don't think... Stay with the car. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, call Mrs. Harlow. Elena stepped out before he could argue, her heart pounding as she approached the warehouse. 2 guards stood at the entrance, both stiffening as they saw her. Mrs. Devereaux. The taller one looked panicked. You shouldn't be here. Where's my husband? Inside, but then that's where I need to be. She pushed past them before they could stop her, stepping into a warehouse that smelled like oil and fear and something copper-sweet that made her stomach turn. Blood. The space was vast and dimly lit. In the center, surrounded by Luca's men, 3 men knelt on the concrete floor, bound, beaten. Castellano soldiers, Elena guessed from the terror in their eyes. And standing over them, gun in hand, was Luca. He looked like a different person, cold, detached, the monster Elena had been so afraid of when they first met. He was speaking in Italian. Words Elena had learned enough to understand were threats, promises of pain, demands for information. Luca. Her voice cut through the warehouse like a gunshot. Every head turned. Luca's eyes widened in shock, then fury. Elena, what the hell are you doing here? Stopping you from making a mistake. He crossed to her in 3 strides, gripping her arm and pulling her toward the door. Away from his men, away from the prisoners who were watching with desperate hope. You need to leave, now. This isn't... You can't be here for this. For what? For you executing these men? For you becoming exactly what your father wanted? Elena pulled free of his grip. I won't watch you destroy yourself. They killed my people. I know, and I'm sorry. But killing them won't bring your men back. It'll just start a cycle of revenge that won't end until you're dead too. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. You showed mercy to Marcus, to Victor. Show it now, please. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You choose mercy or you choose violence. You choose the man I fell in love with or you choose the monster your father made. It's always a choice, Luca. One of his men approached cautiously. Boss, what do you want us to do? Luca stared at Elena for a long moment, his jaw working. She could see the war in his eyes, between the man he'd been trained to be and the man he was trying to become. Let them go, he said finally. Silence. shock rippling through his men. "Boss, I said let them go, but first—" Luca turned to the kneeling men, his voice dropping to something deadly quiet. "You tell Antonio Castellano that I'm giving him one chance. One. He returns what he stole, pays double the value as compensation, and we forget this happened. Or—" He crouched in front of the nearest prisoner. "I stop listening to my wife and show him what real war looks like. You have 24 hours. Go." His men cut the prisoner's bonds. They scrambled to their feet and ran, barely believing their luck. When they were gone, Luca turned back to Elena. "You have no idea what you just did. I saved you from becoming someone you'd hate. No, you made me look weak in front of my men. You undermined my authority. He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You're right. You're absolutely right, and I hate it." Elena stepped closer, her hand finding his chest. "I know this is hard. I know every instinct you have is telling you to fight back. But Luca, we can't keep solving problems with violence. Eventually, it'll destroy us both. They might not take the deal. They might come back harder. Then we'll deal with it, together. But at least we'll have tried to be better first." Luca pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight it almost hurt. "You scare the hell out of me, you know that? Good. Someone needs to keep you honest." He laughed despite himself, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Let's go home, before you convince me to give away the whole empire." "Not the whole empire. Just the parts that require murder. So, most of it. We'll work on it." They rode back to the estate in tense silence. Luca held Elena's hand the entire way, his grip tight enough to bruise. She could feel the conflict radiating off him, gratitude and resentment and fear all tangled together. When they arrived, he dismissed everyone and pulled Elena into his office, closing the door firmly behind them. "We need to talk about this," he said quietly. "About you showing up at my operations. About you making decisions that affect my business. About me being your partner instead of just your wife," Elena finished. "Because that's what you said you wanted. Equal partners in everything." "I know what I said. But Elena, there are things in my world, ugly things, that I don't want you touched by, that I need to protect you from. You can't protect me from your world when I'm living in it, when I'm married to you, when I love you." She crossed to him, her voice softening. "I know you want to keep me separate from the violence, but Luca, we're past that. I've negotiated with Victor. I've watched you nearly go to war twice. I've seen the bodies, the blood. I can't unsee it now. I never wanted this for you." "I know, but it's what we have. So we either face it together or we let it tear us apart." Elena took his hands in hers. "I'm not asking you to give up everything. I'm just asking you to let me help you navigate it, to be the voice that pulls you back from the edge when you're about to do something you'll regret." Luca was quiet for a long moment, studying their joined hands. "My father used to say that love was a weapon, that caring about someone gave your enemies a target, and every day I wake up terrified that he was right, that loving you is going to get you killed. Or loving me is going to keep you alive, keep you human." Elena squeezed his hands. "Your father was wrong about a lot of things. Maybe he was wrong about that too." "Maybe." Luca pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "The Castellanos have until tomorrow night to respond. If they don't take the deal, then we'll figure out what comes next, together." "Together," he agreed. "But Elena, promise me something. If things go bad, if this turns into a real war, you'll let me send you somewhere safe. You'll let me protect you. Only if you promise to come with me. I'm not surviving this world without you." "Deal." They sealed it with a kiss that tasted like promises neither was sure they could keep. The next 24 hours crawled by like torture. Elena watched Luca pace the estate, checking his phone every few minutes, having terse conversations with his lieutenants. The guards doubled, then tripled. The estate transformed back into the fortress it had been when Elena first arrived, all soft edges stripped away. She tried to stay calm, failed miserably. Made it through dinner without tasting a single bite. Went to bed beside Luca but couldn't sleep, both of them lying awake in the darkness, waiting. The call came at 11:47 p.m. Luca's phone lit up the dark room. He answered immediately, his voice neutral. Professional. Devereaux. Pause. I'm listening. Longer pause. Agreed. Tomorrow at noon. Neutral ground. And Antonio, his voice dropped. If this is a setup, there won't be enough left of your family to fill a coffin. We clear? He hung up and turned to Elena in the darkness. They took the deal. All of it. The merchandise, the compensation, and a formal apology. Elena's breath rushed out in a whoosh. That's good, right? That's a miracle. Luca pulled her close, his heart hammering against her cheek. You saved me again, from myself, from this life, from becoming my father. We saved each other. Yeah. He pressed a kiss to her temple. We did. But Elena could hear something in his voice. Relief, yes, but also something else. Fear, maybe. Or resignation. What is it? She asked. What aren't you telling me? Luca was quiet for a long moment. Then, the other families are talking about how I've gone soft, how my wife has too much influence, how I'm making decisions based on emotion instead of strategy. Elena's stomach dropped. Is that going to be a problem? It already is. 3 of my smaller operations have been hit in the last week. Nothing major, just tests. Seeing how I'll respond, seeing if the rumors are true. What rumors? That Luca Devereaux has lost his edge, that loving his wife has made him weak, that he's vulnerable now in ways he never was before. He turned to face her fully. They're not entirely wrong. Luca, I don't regret it, any of it. You've made me better, human. But in this world, being human is dangerous. It gives people leverage. And sooner or later, someone's going to try to use you against me. Elena's throat tightened. So what do? We prove them wrong. We show them that mercy isn't weakness. That being human doesn't make me vulnerable. It makes me unpredictable. Harder to read. More dangerous than I ever was before. His hand found her face in the darkness. But Elena, that means you have to be strong, visible, a partner in every sense. Not hidden away like a weakness, but standing beside me like the asset you are. You want me to be part of your operations, officially. I want you to be what you already are, my equal, my conscience, the thing that makes me better. He kissed her softly, but only if you want it. I won't force you into this life more than I already have. Elena thought about it, about the girl she'd been 3 months ago, invisible, scared, working herself to death for a father who didn't care, and about the woman she'd become, someone who negotiated with mobsters, who stopped wars, who loved a killer and somehow made him want to be better. I want it, she said finally. All of it, the danger and the power and the choices. I want to stand beside you, really stand beside you. Luca's breath caught. You're sure? I'm sure. Then tomorrow, we face the Castellanos together, and we show this world exactly what we are. What's that? Unbreakable. The meeting with Antonio Castellano happened in the same neutral club where they'd negotiated with Victor, but this time the atmosphere was different, heavier, more dangerous. Antonio was younger than Elena expected, mid-30s with slicked back hair and a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He looked at Elena like she was a curiosity, a pet Luca had brought to the negotiating table. It made her blood boil. Mr. Devereaux, Antonio said, his accent thick with Brooklyn streets. You bring your wife to business meetings now? How progressive. Mrs. Devereaux is my partner, Luca said coldly. And the reason you're sitting here instead of bleeding out in a warehouse. I'd show some respect if I were you. Antonio's smile faltered. Of course. No disrespect intended. He slid a folder across the table. Documentation of the returned merchandise, wire transfer receipts for the compensation. A formal letter of apology written in language so flowery it was clearly meant to be insulting. Luca reviewed it all without comment, then passed it to Elena. She read carefully, noting the numbers, the terms, the subtle digs embedded in the apology. This is acceptable, she said, sliding it back. With one addition. Both men looked at her, Luca with surprise, Antonio with barely concealed contempt. What addition? Antonio asked. A non-aggression pact, similar to what we have with the Kozlovs, territory lines clearly defined, consequences for breach clearly stated, Signed and witnessed. Elena's voice was steady, clear. You pay compensation for this incident, but going forward, we have peace, real peace, or we have war. That wasn't part of the deal. It is now. Luca's voice was sharp. My wife makes a good point. This hit-and-run nonsense ends today. We either establish boundaries and respect them, or we settle this the old way. Your choice. Antonio's jaw worked. He looked between them, clearly trying to find an angle, a weakness to exploit. He found none. Fine, he said finally. We'll draft the pact. But understand something, Devereaux. Not everyone sees your new partnership as strength. Some of us remember when you ruled through fear, not negotiation. And some of you remember what happened to the last person who threatened what I love, Luca said quietly. Ask the Kozlovs about their 12 dead soldiers. Then ask yourself if you want to test whether I've really gone soft. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Antonio stood, buttoning his jacket. The pact will be ready by Friday. We'll sign then. We'll be there. When he was gone, Luca turned to Elena with something like awe in his eyes. A non-aggression pact. Why didn't I think of that? Because you were too busy being angry to think strategically. Elena's hand found his under the table. But that's what I'm here for, to think clearly when you can't. You're incredible. You know that? I'm learning. They left the club hand in hand, and Elena felt something shift. Not just between them, but in the world around them. The guards looked at her differently, with respect instead of just obligation. The people they passed on the street seemed to sense the power dynamic. This wasn't a mobster and his trophy wife. This was a partnership, something to be feared and respected in equal measure. I need to tell you something, Luca said as they drove home. Something I've been putting off because I didn't want to burden you with it. Elena's stomach tightened. What? There's a meeting next month. All the East Coast families. It happens once a year. We discuss territories, settle disputes, make deals. And this year, because of everything that's happened, all eyes are going to be on us. He squeezed her hand. On you. They're going to want to meet the woman who's changing how business is done. Who's making Luca Devereaux show mercy. Is that going to be a problem? It's going to be a test. They'll push. Try to find weaknesses. See if you're really as formidable as the rumors suggest, or if you're just a pretty face I've gotten soft over. His voice hardened. And Elena, I need to know if you're ready for that. Because once they see you, really see you, there's no going back. You become a target, a player, someone they'll try to use or eliminate. Elena thought about the girl she'd been. The invisible waitress who'd let life happen to her instead of making choices. Then she thought about the woman she'd become, someone who negotiated with killers, who stopped wars, who loved a monster and made him human. I'm ready, she said. Whatever they throw at us, we'll face it, together. Luca brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Then we're going to show them something this world has never seen before. What's that? A partnership built on love instead of fear, strength through mercy, power through being human. His smile was fierce. We're going to change the rules, Elena, and they're going to hate us for it. Good. Let them hate us, as long as we have each other. Always. But even as Elena said it, even as she believed it, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. This world didn't reward love, didn't forgive mercy, and sooner or later, someone would make them pay for trying to be different. She just hoped they'd be strong enough to survive it when they did. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Luca taught Elena everything, the names and faces of every family head, their territories, their histories, their weaknesses. Which ones could be negotiated with, and which ones only understood violence. Who to trust, and who to watch carefully. The Russos are ambitious but loyal if you treat them with respect. The Morettis are old school. They'll hate that you're a woman with power, but they'll respect strength if you show it. And the Salvatores, Luca's expression darkened. Stay away from Dominic Salvatore. He's dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with business. What do you mean? I mean he has a taste for hurting women, and he'll see you as a challenge, a prize to take from me. Luca's jaw clenched. If he approaches you, you stay within my sight, Always. Elena nodded, filing the information away. She spent hours studying the files Luca gave her, memorizing details, understanding the complex web of alliances and rivalries that governed this world. And slowly, she began to see it. Not just the violence and the danger, but the strategy, the chess game being played with human lives as pieces. The careful balance of power that kept everyone alive and prosperous. It was brutal, unforgiving, but there was a terrible beauty to it too. She was starting to understand why Luca had never been able to walk away. The night before the meeting, Elena couldn't sleep. She stood at the bedroom window, watching the grounds, trying to calm the anxiety churning in her stomach. Luca found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Having second thoughts? Terrified thoughts, Elena admitted. What if I mess this up? What if I say the wrong thing and start a war we can't win? Then we'll deal with it, together. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. But Elena, you've already proven you can handle these people. Victor respects you, Antonio fears you, and His voice roughened. I trust you more than I've ever trusted anyone. Elena turned in his arms, looking up at him. I love you. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that. You've given me a life I never imagined. Purpose, power, a partnership that makes me feel strong instead of small. And I'm grateful, even for the terrifying parts. Luca's eyes were bright with emotion. I love you too. More than I thought I was capable of. More than I knew was possible. He cupped her face gently. Tomorrow, we walk into that meeting as equals. And we show them that love isn't weakness. It's the strongest weapon we have. Promise me something, Elena whispered. Anything. If things go wrong, if someone comes for us, we face it together. No more trying to protect me by sending me away. We stand together or we fall together. Luca was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. Together, I promise. They made love that night with a desperation that spoke to the danger they both felt coming, slowly, tenderly, like they were memorizing each other's bodies in case they never got the chance again. And when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Elena dreamed of fire and blood and choosing to stay anyway. Because some things were worth fighting for, some things were worth dying for. And Luca Devereaux, broken, dangerous, desperately trying to be better, was both. The meeting was held in an estate that made Luca's look modest, a sprawling compound in the Hamptons that belonged to the Moretti family, chosen as neutral ground because of their age and supposed impartiality. Elena rode in silence beside Luca, her hand clasped tightly in his, both of them dressed for war disguised as diplomacy. She wore a midnight blue dress that was elegant without being soft, expensive without being ostentatious, a statement that she belonged here. 4 cars followed theirs, guards, protection, a show of strength that every family would be making. Remember what I told you, Luca said quietly as they pulled through the gates. Stay calm. Speak only when you have something worth saying. And if Dominic Salvatore so much as looks at you wrong, you come straight to me. I can handle Dominic Salvatore. I know you can, but I need you to let me handle him if it comes to that, for both our sakes. His grip tightened on her hand. Some men in this world only understand one language, and with him, it's not negotiation. The ballroom where the meeting was held looked like something from another century. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, long tables arranged in a horseshoe where the family heads would sit. Guards lined the walls. Each family had brought their own, a sea of armed men watching each other with barely concealed suspicion. And in the center of it all, the heads of the 6 most powerful crime families on the East Coast. Victor Kozlov saw them first, nodding acknowledgement with something that might have been respect. Antonio Castellano looked away quickly, still smarting from his recent capitulation. The others, the Russos, the Morettis, the Salvatores, watched with varying degrees of curiosity and calculation as Luca led Elena to their assigned seats. Dominic Salvatore's eyes followed her the entire way. Elena felt his gaze like oil on her skin, and she understood immediately what Luca had meant. This wasn't attraction, it was predation. She lifted her chin and met his stare head-on until he smiled, slow and cruel, and looked away. First test passed. The meeting began with formalities. Old business. Territory disputes that had been settled, payments that had been made, The usual dance of men pretending civilization while discussing violence. Elena sat beside Luca, taking it all in, watching the power dynamics, seeing who deferred to whom, who held grudges, who was looking for allies. It was fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Then Leonardo Moretti, the oldest of the family heads, cleared his throat and turned his attention to Luca. "We should address the elephant in the room," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 70 years in this life. The Devereaux family has undergone some changes recently, changes that have affected how business is conducted. I think we all deserve an explanation. What explanation do you need? Luca's voice was calm, controlled. I've honored all agreements, maintained my territories, resolved disputes without unnecessary bloodshed. My business is stronger than ever. Your business, Dominic Salvatore drawled, is being run by your wife. From what we hear, she's the one making decisions now, convincing you to show mercy, negotiating treaties. His eyes slid to Elena. Tell me, Mrs. Devereaux, what makes you think you understand our world well enough to influence it? The room went silent. Every eye turned to Elena. This was it, the moment Luca had warned her about. The test. She could feel Luca tense beside her, ready to defend her, but she put her hand on his arm gently. A signal. Let me handle this. I don't presume to understand your world completely, Elena said, her voice steady and clear. I've only been part of it for a few months, but I understand enough to see that strength doesn't only come from violence. Sometimes it comes from knowing when not to kill, when to negotiate instead of escalate, when to turn an enemy into an ally instead of a corpse. Pretty words, Dominic said, but they sound like weakness dressed up as wisdom. Then explain why the Kozlovs and the Castellanos both agreed to peace treaties when they could have had war. Explain why Luca's operations are more profitable now than they were a year ago, with fewer casualties and less heat from law enforcement. She leaned forward slightly. I'm not trying to change who any of you are. I'm just showing my husband that there's more than one way to be strong. And if that bothers you, Mr. Salvatore, perhaps you should ask yourself why. Dominic's smile turned dangerous. Perhaps I should ask your husband if he's comfortable letting his woman speak for him. Elena speaks for herself, Luca said quietly, and she speaks the truth. My operations are stronger. My alliance is more stable. My position more secure. All because she convinced me that mercy isn't weakness, it's strategy. Show kindness where you can and people remember. They become loyal instead of just afraid. And loyalty is worth more than fear any day. Loyalty can be bought with strength, one of the Russo brothers interjected. Your father understood that. My father is dead, Luca said flatly. Killed by men he thought feared him enough to stay loyal. Turns out fear has a shelf life. But respect, real respect, lasts. He stood, and Elena stood with him. I'm not my father. I'm not interested in ruling through terror or intimidation. I'm interested in building something that lasts, something sustainable. And if that makes me weak in your eyes, then so be it. But I invite any of you to test that weakness. See how well it works out. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Leonardo Moretti chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. Sit down, Devereaux. No one's challenging you. Yet. He looked around the table. Though I admit I'm curious to see if this new approach works long-term, or if it gets you both killed. We'll take that risk, Elena said, sitting back down. Luca followed her lead. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, more business, more negotiations. But Elena could feel the shift. Some of the men were watching her with respect now, others with calculation. All of them were reassessing what the Devereaux family represented. When it finally ended, Victor Kozlov approached them as they were leaving. That was well done, he said quietly. You made them think. That's more than most achieve at these gatherings. Thank you, Elena said. A word of warning, though. Victor's expression turned serious. Dominic Salvatore doesn't forget slights. And you just made him look foolish in front of his peers. Watch your back. We will, Luca said, his hand finding Elena's. Thanks for the heads up. They made it to the car without incident, both exhaling in relief once they were safely inside. You were incredible, Luca said, pulling her close. The way you stood up to Dominic, the way you articulated exactly what we've been trying to build. Elena, you just changed the conversation for every family at that table. I just told the truth. The truth is dangerous in this world, but you made it powerful. He kissed her softly. I'm so proud of you. Elena leaned into him, feeling the adrenaline slowly drain away. Victor was right, though. Dominic is going to come for us. I saw it in his eyes. Let him try. We'll be ready. But as they drove home through the fading daylight, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was coming, that they'd passed one test only to trigger a harder one. She just didn't know how right she was. The attack came 3 days later, and it came when they were most vulnerable. Elena and Luca had gone into the city for dinner, a rare night out, just the two of them, trying to pretend they were a normal couple for a few hours. They'd left most of the guards at the estate, taking only 2 cars of security. A calculated risk that Luca had assured her was safe. He'd been wrong. They were driving through a quiet neighborhood when the first shots rang out. The car in front of them exploded in a ball of fire, flipping end over end. The car behind them swerved, taking fire from both sides. Down! Luca shoved Elena to the floor, covering her body with his as bullets tore through the windows. Glass rained down on them. Their driver was hit, slumping forward onto the horn. The car veered wildly, jumping the curb and slamming into a building. The impact threw Elena forward despite Luca's grip, her head cracking against the seat in front of her. Stars exploded across her vision. Elena! Luca's voice sounded distant, muffled. Elena, talk to me. I'm okay, she managed, though her head was screaming and she could taste blood. I'm okay. Luca kicked out the shattered window and pulled her through it, half carrying her into the cover of the building. Gunfire echoed all around them. Screams, the sound of engines and running feet. How many? Luca shouted at one of his guards, who'd taken cover nearby. At least 12, maybe more. They've got us surrounded. Luca cursed viciously, checking Elena over for injuries. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead, and her shoulder ached where she'd hit it, but nothing felt broken. We need to move, Luca said. Get to the secondary extraction point. Can you run? Yes. He pulled his gun, making sure it was loaded. Then he looked at Elena with an intensity that stole her breath. No matter what happens, you stay behind me. You don't play hero. You don't try to save me. You survive. Understood? Luca, promise me, Elena. Promise me you'll survive this. She wanted to argue, wanted to say they'd both survive or neither would, but the look in his eyes stopped her. I promise. They ran. Through alleys and side streets, Luca leading the way with his remaining guards providing cover. Behind them, the attackers pursued, organized, professional, clearly not stopping until one side was dead. Salvatore's men. It had to be. This wasn't random. This was an execution. They made it 4 blocks before they were cornered in a dead-end alley. Luca positioned Elena behind him, against the wall, his body a shield between her and the men closing in. 8 of them, all armed, all advancing with the confidence of people who knew they had their target trapped. Luca Devereaux, the leader said, his accent marking him as Salvatore family. Mr. Salvatore sends his regards, says to tell you that mercy is weakness after all, and weakness gets you killed. Tell Dominic he's made a mistake, Luca said calmly, too calmly. Tell him coming for my wife was the last mistake he'll ever make. You won't be alive to make good on that threat. The man raised his gun. Time seemed to slow. Elena watched it happen like she was outside her body, saw the finger tighten on the trigger, saw Luca shift, putting himself more firmly between her and the barrel, saw his absolute certainty that he was about to die protecting her. And Elena made a choice. She stepped out from behind him, raising her hands. Wait! Her voice cut through the alley. Wait! Don't shoot! Elena, what are you... I'm what Dominic really wants, aren't I? She looked at the leader. The woman who embarrassed him, who spoke back, who changed the rules. She took another step forward, ignoring Luca's attempt to pull her back. Take me. Let Luca go. I'll come quietly. No more shooting, no more bodies. Just take me and end this. Elena, no. It's the only way. She looked at Luca, memorizing his face. You promised you'd survive. I'm making sure you do. I'm not letting them take you. You don't have a choice, like... She turned back to Salvatore's men. Do we have a deal? The leader considered, then smiled. Salvatore's going to enjoy breaking you. Yeah, we have a deal. But before anyone could move, a new sound cut through the alley. Engines, multiple vehicles, and a voice Elena recognized calling out in Russian. I think not. Viktor Kozlov emerged from a car that had just screeched to a stop at the alley entrance, flanked by at least 20 armed men. He looked at the scene, taking in Elena's position, Luca's desperate fury, and Salvatore's men trapped between them. Mrs. Devereaux, Viktor said calmly, step back beside your husband, please. Elena moved quickly, Luca's arm coming around her immediately. Kozlov, the Salvatore lieutenant said nervously, this isn't your business. It became my business when Dominic Salvatore decided to break the very rules we established at the council. No targeting of spouses or family members, no hits without council approval. Victor's voice was ice. He's violated both, which means he's violated all of us. Salvatore will hear about this. Salvatore will be too busy dealing with the other families to care about what you think. Victor gestured to his men. Disarm them, all of them, and make sure they understand the message. The Russians moved with brutal efficiency. Within seconds, Salvatore's men were on their knees, weapons confiscated, facing very real consequences for their failed execution. Victor walked over to Luca and Elena, his expression unreadable. You're welcome. Why? Luca asked bluntly. Why help us? Because Mrs. Devereaux is right. Mercy isn't weakness, it's strategy. And because Dominic Salvatore has been a problem for years, this gives the rest of us the excuse we've been looking for to deal with him. Victor looked at Elena. Also, you impressed me at the council. I'd hate to see that potential wasted. What's going to happen to Dominic? Elena asked. The council will vote. Unanimously, I suspect. And then the Salvatore family will need new leadership. Victor's smile was cold. Such is the price of breaking the rules. He turned and walked back to his car, his men dragging Salvatore's soldiers with them. Within moments, the alley was empty except for Luca and Elena and the distant sound of sirens approaching. We need to go, Luca said quietly, before the police arrive. They made it back to the estate just as the sun was rising. Elena's adrenaline had worn off, leaving her shaking and exhausted and acutely aware of how close they'd both come to dying. Mrs. Harlow was waiting with medical supplies, tending to Elena's cut and bruised shoulder with gentle efficiency, while Luca made phone calls, mobilizing every resource he had. The council is meeting tonight, he told Elena when he finally hung up. Emergency session, Victor's calling for Salvatore's removal. It's going to pass. And then what? Then we're safe. For real this time. Because every family will know that coming for us means facing not just me, but Victor and every other family that values the rules. He sat beside her, taking her hand carefully. Elena, what you did in that alley was stupid. I know. Was the bravest thing I've ever seen, and the most terrifying. His voice cracked. You were going to sacrifice yourself for me. You were going to die protecting me. I just evened the odds. I love you so much it scares me. Luca pressed his forehead to hers. When I saw you step out from behind me, offering yourself, Elena, my heart stopped. I faced death 100 times without flinching, but the thought of losing you, you didn't lose me. We're both here, we both survived. Because Victor intervened. If he hadn't, but he did. Because of the alliances we built, the mercy we showed, the different way of doing things that made him respect us. Elena cupped his face. Don't you see? Everything we've been trying to do, it worked. It actually worked. Luca pulled her close, and Elena felt him trembling. This man who'd survived so much, who'd been trained never to show weakness, was shaking in her arms. I can't do this without you, he whispered. I thought I could. Thought I was strong enough. But Elena, you've become the thing that keeps me human. If I lost you, I'd become everything I've been trying not to be. Then it's a good thing you're stuck with me. He laughed through what might have been tears. Yeah, it is. The council vote was unanimous. Dominic Salvatore was stripped of his position and exiled, a fate worse than death in their world. His brother, a more reasonable man according to Victor, took control of the family and immediately signed a peace treaty with Luca. The message was clear. The rules mattered, and breaking them had consequences. But more than that, it established something new. a precedent that protecting family wasn't weakness. It was the line no one could cross without facing united retaliation. Elena and Luca had changed the game without meaning to, and somehow, impossibly, they'd survived it. 2 months later, Elena stood in front of a construction site on the edge of the city, watching workers pour the foundation for what would become the Voss Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping families in debt, providing resources and support so desperate people didn't have to make the choices her father had made. Luca stood beside her, his arm around her waist, watching her dream take shape. "You know this is going to cost a fortune," he said, but he was smiling. "You have a fortune." "True. And I can't think of a better way to spend it." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Your father would be proud, I think." "My father would be confused. But maybe that's the point." Elena leaned into him, taking the worst thing he did and turning it into something good, making sure other people don't end up trapped the way I was. "You were never trapped. You just didn't know how strong you were yet." "I didn't know a lot of things, like that I could love someone who bought me, that I could be part of this world without losing myself, that mercy could be powerful." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "You taught me all of that." "We taught each other." They stood there watching the sun set over the construction site, two people who'd started as captor and captive and somehow become partners. Equals. Something neither had thought possible. "Marry me again?" Luca said suddenly. Elena blinked. "What?" "Marry me again, but this time do it right. No debts, no force, just you and me choosing each other." His eyes were bright with emotion. "I want to stand across from you and say vows that mean something, that aren't tainted by how this started. I want to give you the choice I took from you the first time." Elena's throat tightened. "Luca, you don't have to answer now. Think about it. But Elena, I want to marry the woman who stopped a war, who negotiated with killers, who made me believe I could be better, not the terrified girl I forced to the altar." He cupped her face gently. "Will you think about it?" "I don't need to think about it." Elena smiled through tears. Yes, I'll marry you again as many times as you want, because you're right. I'm not that terrified girl anymore. I'm someone who chose this life, chose you, and I'd choose you again every single day." Luca kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked, like she was home. And maybe she was. The second wedding happened on a Sunday morning in the estate gardens, surrounded by flowers instead of guards. Mrs. Harlow was there, crying openly. Marcus and his daughter, healthy now because of the surgery Luca had paid for. Daniel, the man Elena had saved from the Kozlovs. Viktor Kozlov himself standing as witness. Even James the driver grinning like he'd won the lottery. No weapons, no threats. Just people who'd become family in the strangest ways possible. Elena wore white again, but this time it was a dress she'd chosen. Simple, elegant, hers. And when she walked toward Luca through the garden, they'd walked together 100 times. She wasn't being led. She was choosing, every step. Luca waited for her in a suit that made him look almost normal. Almost like a regular man marrying the woman he loved instead of a crime boss recommitting to his wife. The officiant was the same nervous man from before, but this time he smiled as he began. "We are gathered here today to witness the union, the chosen union, of Luca Dante Devereaux and Elena Marie Voss." Luca's hand found hers, and Elena felt the tremor in his fingers. He was nervous. This man who'd faced death 100 times was nervous marrying her. It made her love him even more. "Luca, do you take Elena to be your wife? To love and cherish, to support and protect, to be her partner in all things for as long as you both shall live?" "I do." His voice was steady. "Sure. I choose her. Today and every day. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because she's made me believe in things I thought were impossible. Like redemption. And love. And being better than what I was made to be." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "And Elena, do you take Luca to be your husband? To love and cherish, to support and protect, to be his partner in all things, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do." Elena's voice rang clear and strong. "I choose him. Not because I was forced, not because I had no other option, but because he's shown me that people can change, that love can exist in the darkest places, that being strong means knowing when to show mercy. I choose him, every part of him, every day." Luca's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife, again, for real this time." The officiant smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Luca pulled Elena into his arms and kissed her in front of everyone. A kiss that was a promise and a celebration and a beginning. A kiss that tasted like freedom and choice and hope. When they pulled apart, cheers erupted from their small gathering. Mrs. Harlow was sobbing. Victor was actually smiling, and Elena felt lighter than she had in her entire life. This was real. This was chosen. This was theirs. The reception was simple: food and music and laughter. Luca danced with Elena in the garden while the sun set, just like they had that first night on the balcony. But this time, there was no fear, no uncertainty, just joy. "I have something for you," Luca said as they swayed together. "A wedding gift." "You already gave me everything." "Not everything." He pulled back, reaching into his jacket. "Here." He handed her a folder. Elena opened it, confused, then froze. Legal documents, transferring half of everything he owned into her name. The estate, the businesses, the accounts, everything. "Luca, what? You said you wanted to be partners, equal partners. This makes it legal. You're not just my wife. You're my partner in every sense. What's mine is yours." His expression was serious, earnest. "I'm trusting you with everything, Elena, because you've earned it, because you've proven you can handle it, because I love you, and I want you to know you're not dependent on me. You're not trapped. You could walk away tomorrow and be set for life. I'm not walking away." "I know, but now you're choosing to stay because you want to, not because you have to. That matters to me." Elena threw her arms around his neck, kissing him fiercely. "I love you so much. I love you too. My wife, my partner, my salvation." They danced until the stars came out, wrapped in each other and the life they'd built from ashes. Later that night, alone in their room, Luca held Elena close and whispered against her hair, "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me, for staying, for making me believe I could be more than what I was." His voice was rough with emotion. "For loving me when I didn't deserve it and making me want to deserve it." "You deserve it now," Elena said firmly. "You deserve everything. Happiness, peace, love, all of it. So do you. Then I guess we're lucky we found each other. Luck had nothing to do with it. You walked into my life and changed everything, made me question everything, made me want to be better." He kissed her softly. "You saved me, Elena. In every way a person can be saved." We saved each other. And they had. The girl who'd been invisible had found her voice. The monster who'd been trained to feel nothing had learned to love. Together, they'd built something impossible. A partnership forged in darkness, but chosen in light. A love that had started with force, but become the freest thing either had ever known. They'd changed the rules of their world, proven that mercy could be strength, that love could exist in the darkest places, that people could choose to be better than what they were made to be. And as Elena drifted off to sleep in Luca's arms, she thought about the girl she'd been 4 months ago, terrified, alone, trapped by her father's debts. That girl wouldn't recognize the woman she'd become, the woman who negotiated with killers, who stopped wars, who stood beside a crime boss as an equal and made him believe in redemption. But Elena recognized her, knew exactly how she'd gotten here, through choosing courage over fear, love over hate, hope over despair, through choosing Luca over and over again, until the choice became as natural as breathing. And Luca, broken, dangerous, desperately trying to be worthy of her love, had chosen her right back, had let her change him, had become the man she saw when she looked past the monster. Together, they'd rewritten their story, turned captivity into partnership, possession into love, darkness into light. And in a world that rewarded violence and punished mercy, they'd done the impossible. They'd chosen each other, really chosen each other. And they'd survived, more than survived. They'd thrived, and they would continue to thrive, together, as partners, as equals, as two broken souls who'd found wholeness in each other. For as long as they both shall live. The debt that became a marriage had become something neither could have imagined. It had become love, real, chosen, unbreakable love. And that was worth everything.